The Law of the Sea Treaty. Will U.S. sovereignty be lost?
Thanks again to all of you for coming today. I know that there's a lot of speakers on the panel. That's really an indication of how many problems there are with this treaty. There are specific provisions that have already been spoken about that are very problematic, but I'd like to show you the problems that it has on more of a systematic level. And I'll just start off with a comment that Brian made at the beginning, which is if you like the United Nations, then you are going to like the Law of the Sea Treaty. Because if you like how the UN bureaucracy works, you should be happy to sign up for yet another version of that bureaucracy. And that's what this treaty has created, along with a legislative, executive, and quasi-judicial branch. It has created a new UN bureaucracy to control over 70% of the Earth's surface. These are the facts. You'll hear rebuttals to the other side, but they don't hide this. On the official Law of the Sea website, you will see that they call this the Constitution for the Oceans. And the problem with this new UN bureaucracy is the United States will have about as much say in it as we do in other UN bureaucracies, which is one vote out of more than 150. Just as we do not have our say at the UN General Assembly and other UN bodies, we will also not have our say in this bureaucracy. And that's because these bodies vote in large voting blocks, with voting blocks like the G77 and the Organization of the Islamic Conference. These are the groups that control what happens in these international bodies, and these are the groups that have control over the Law of the Sea Treaty. It's not just that. Once we join, we have the privilege of funding the Law of the Sea Treaty bodies to the tune of 22%, which is how we are assessed on the general UN budget. We'll also start funding this Law of the Sea Treaty body. And believe me, their budget won't stay at the size it will now. Now that the U.S. is on the hook, you will see their budget expand, just like the budget for the UN has expanded over the years. So joining a new international bureaucracy in which we have no say and yet provide the bulk of the funding, that is what Law of the Sea stands for, and that's what your members will be signing on to if they ratify the treaty. That's one major systematic problem with this treaty. There is a second one, and that is the entire purpose of the treaty, which goes back to a world government basis for redistributing wealth from developed countries to developing countries. This is where the International Seabed Authority and this undersea mining provision comes into play, because the whole point is to take money that has been mined, the revenues that are taken, that are earned by companies and countries that take the risks and have the technology and the know-how, taking those proceeds and putting them into underdeveloped countries or landlocked countries who don't have navies. Now, these are all things that the U.S. has fought for over the years with our tax dollars, with our desire to have a strong navy. And international waters right now are at our control because we've earned the right to run our boats however we see fit and to mine wherever we see fit because we've got the technology and the know-how. This treaty sets that entire theory on its head and says that no longer will you rule the oceans because we're going to put this new bureaucracy in place that will make their rulings depending on how they feel about how the surface of the ocean should be ruled and how the seabed should be ruled. They don't hide this as the purpose of the treaty. Just look at the language of the treaty itself, where it says that the area of the seabed and the ocean floor is the common heritage of mankind. This is a right, this is some type of concept that is made out of whole cloth. Since when has the surface of the ocean or the seabed been the common heritage of mankind? It's just a theory pulled out of thin air. But more disturbingly is the redistributionist elements of the treaty. Just look right at the language. This isn't a right-wing talking point or some wingnut theory. Right in the language it says, as Chris alluded to, that the treaty will contribute to the realization of a just and equitable international economic order. Is that what your senators want to sign on to? Being part of establishing a just and equitable international economic order and then leaving this lost bureaucracy to define for you what that economic order shall be? That sounds like a dangerous precedent to set. Now, in addition to all that problem, the UN has shown itself to be a failure to actually redistribute wealth. So to the extent that we have actually given them dollars to redistribute, to develop other countries that are in need, they show themselves to be an utter failure. You don't have to look any further than the UN Development, the UNDP, the UN Development Program, to see what lies ahead should we give more money to the UN bureaucracy to help in developing countries. They're embroiled in scandal in North Korea, where they've given hard dollars to Kim Jong-il's regime. That is what lies in store ahead if we set up yet a second bureaucracy and participate and fund in another bureaucracy for UN development purposes. So because of the fact that this treaty has set up a new bureaucracy, we should not get involved in it, we should not fund it, we should not sign the treaty.
The Law of the Sea Treaty. Will U.S. sovereignty be lost?
For more information, log on to heritage.org.